Hey Tae, how's it going?
It's going. I am a little tipsy, not gonna lie.
Oh my
How are you?
god, crazy. I am too. It is a lovely evening tonight. We're recording late. It's so nice to be in person.
It is.
This is crazy. We haven't done a full real episode that we've released to the public in person.
That's true, because the first one we recorded was kind of bad, so we had to redo it.
That's the unreleased pilot episode.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Extras on Patreon. Just kidding. We don't have Patreon.
We don't have
yet.
Patreon. Not yet. You know what I've been watching lately?
Yeah, tell me about it. Owl House.
The Owl House! I love The Owl House.
It's a good show.
It's such a good show. And you have been trying to get me to watch it for years.
For years, yes.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I finally did it. People say that it starts out slow, and that's true. Because I watched the first 4 episodes maybe a year or 2 ago, and I was not enticed.
Right. You were into the school vibes.
What do you mean?
That's what you told me. You were like, oh, it's
Did I
giving,
say
like,
that?
rip-off Harry Potter. I'm not into it.
Oh.
Or something like that.
Oh, I wasn't into the school vibes.
Yeah, you weren't into the school vibes.
I see. Yeah, I can see that. I also didn't know anything about the Lumity of it all. And then you mentioned something literally on the podcast. I think it was
Really?
like the second episode. You were talking about the evolution of explicit queerness in kids' cartoons
just kids'
in
cartoons
general.
in general. Yeah, no, I remember that.
Specifically for like WW
There's
stuff.
no way I didn't tell you about the Lumity before.
I'm sure you did, but then you said something specific about Luce and Amity, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll check out the Owl House again. And lo and behold, the first episode I come back to is an Amity included episode. And I was like, oh, okay, I know where this is going. Like, I know who this is. And then I was invested, just waiting for the ship. And then along the way, I really enjoyed the show as well.
Okay, so I feel like you need to expand on that now, because you've been telling me off air about how you've actually really got into Lumity, like, in a fandom way, after you spent, like, our entire last episode saying that you have 0 WLW ships that you're that invested in. So what changed? Like, what got you into them?
So I have so many amendments to make for last episode, actually. A lot of apologies to make. What is the apology video, like, meme? Breaking my silence.
Oh yeah. Breaking your silence on Wicked.
Yeah, I'm breaking my silence about what I said last episode about not having any WW ships that I'm really fandom about because I love Lumity.
Yes, so into Lumity.
So into Lumity. I cannot stop drawing fan art. That's really bad because I'm not an artist like that.
That's how you get better, though.
I guess so. We're starting over at 20-something. But I love Lumity, and then I also love Willow's.
Is that just Willow and Luce?
It's Willow and Luce. And then also, I like Luce. I like Willow and Amity. And then I also like the Luce, Willow, Amity, Hunter one.
That's crazy. I've low-key never seen these. I've seen maybe a little bit of Willow and Amity, because
Amity, yeah.
It's been years since I've seen the show. Actually, hasn't been? No, like a year. Because
the last season came out a year ago.
Last year, yeah. Because I remember watching it at college with my friends, and I was like, wow, this is so rare for an animated show. Okay, well, just generally shows to have like a good finale that feels like satisfying. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was extremely impressive because fucking Disney cut their last season into 3 episodes. And those specials still managed to pack in, like, everything. I mean, the pacing was a little whack, but that's expected.
It was a little whack, but, like, it was very impressive.
Right. Because it still felt like a satisfying end. And I was like, wow, that was, like, really good.
I had little to complain about. There was no complaints that I had, really, that I couldn't just excuse with, like, oh, but everything was cut. Mm-hmm. They really did the best that they could with what they worked with what they were given really well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, like, the Willow Amity ship. I feel like that would make sense to me because they had that, like, previous friendship, right? And then they kind of, like, grew apart, if I remember correctly.
Super angsty.
Which is, like, really tea. But I've never seen Willow and Luce. That's kind of interesting. You should expand on that.
Okay, so I saw this thing on Tumblr that was, like, somebody was sending around asks about, like, what your Owl House ship says about you. And the Willow's ship was, like, yeah, season 1 is your favorite season. And I don't know if that's true because I literally watched this show in the span of a week. I don't know. I was rewatching it recently And it was the episode where Luce meets Willow for the first time. It's I Was a Teenage Abomination, like episode 3 or 2. And Amity is just like so mean at the beginning.
That's true.
And not even in a like, oh, they're rivals way, because she's just like so mean to her friend. But Willow, when they first meet in the woods, they're like, it's like they have chemistry.
I don't even remember their first meeting, but now I'm like seeing the vision more, because it was like the first season was mostly Luce hanging out with like Willow and Gus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I totally like forgot about the beginning of the show, kind of.
Yeah.
And their Luce and Amity's whole arc of enemies to lovers, which is kind of crazy. Need to brush back up on it. But I feel like that's kind of cute. Also, I don't know, like, this is obviously like a pretty shallow reason, but like, as a queer person of color, it's always nice to see like, you know, characters of color get with characters of color. And like, obviously love Lumity, it's super cute, but it would be nice to see like a mainstream show do it again. Like, obviously Korosami, but they're both women of color. But it would be nice to see a mainstream show do that again. Although, you know my opinions on Willow's design.
On Willow, is she Korean though?
I think she's supposed to be Korean.
Yeah.
And, like, obviously she's, like, really cute as a character and stuff, but that is not a Korean woman when I look at her. Like, what happened to drawing Asian characters looking Asian? Okay, well, maybe not, like, in the racist caricature way, but...
Hey, at least you knew they were Asian. Like... Yeah, I mean, they do say her last name. But also, isn't that interesting that, like, heritage last names are the same in the Boiling Isles? I just thought that was really funny.
It is pretty funny, like, what they decide to transfer over. Yeah, because, like, the proof that she's Korean is, Willow Park, so Korean last name. Her father's design is pretty definitively Asian, although she has 2 fathers, so it's like, is she their biological child? Who knows? And then also the voice actress, I believe, is half Korean.
But, like, was Willow supposed to be Wasian?
Yeah, I think Willow's supposed to be Wasian, because otherwise explain the blue eye or green eyes. And then also... Willow was included in a tweet by the official, like, Disney TVA, I believe, account on celebrating AAPI month as, like, an Asian American character.
Yeah, but I don't really see any proof that she's Asian except for the fact that she doesn't look very Asian.
So you think she's supposed to be full Asian?
I think she should be full Asian because it's not like her other dad is white.
Yeah, he's black, right?
I think so.
I could be totally wrong. Don't quote us on that.
But he's not white.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Slay.
And so it's like, why, I mean... I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. Cartoon, and no one's thinking about it that deeply. But, like, why does she look white? She's definitely not supposed to be white. Totally white, that's for sure. Anyway. But Willow and Luce have chemistry. That's
Slay.
Yeah. Sorry, did you want to add something more?
Oh, no, I was just going to bring up Glimmer, but that's totally moving to a different show. Because I also have problems with her design. Glimmer from She-Ra. Did you watch She-Ra?
Oh,
you watched She-Ra, right?
Yeah, I totally did. Her Glimmer is Wasian though.
Glimmer's Wasian.
Yeah.
But does she look Wasian? If you squint, maybe.
If I squint.
Yeah, but like I feel like
squints.
Oh, the alcohol's getting to you. But yeah, no, like Glimmer is supposed to be Wasian. Well, her mom is pink, right? Pink, purple. What is it, Angela?
I think she's like a.
She's like pink, right?
Like a gray pink.
Okay,
like
yeah,
pink hair.
love her. Mm-hmm. Love that character. I was very devastated when she died. Spoilers. But...
Bruh! That's fair. I should have finished it. Bruh!
Oh, I forgot. You didn't finish it?
No.
Oh, my bad. It's okay. It's not that big of a plot point.
I watched the end and I was like not really impressed by the kiss and I was like, whatever.
Oh, you weren't going to finish it anyways.
Maybe.
Okay, well,
just
it's
continue
fine.
what you're saying. Whatever,
Anyways,
whatever.
Yeah. Angela... Yeah, she's white, probably. And then the dad's pretty obviously Asian. Like, he does look Asian. And I would say Frosta also looks pretty Asian. But Glimmer, Frosta, the ice girl.
Wait, is she related to them?
No, she's just also Asian. Like, another Asian character that, like, actually looks
looks
Asian
Asian
in the show. And then Glimmer's supposed to be Wasian, right? But, like, I feel like, okay, once you tell me, you can kind of see it. And obviously there's Wasian people that look more white. But it's, like, kind of interesting to me that there's such a trend... in like animated shows these days where I can't tell that any of these bitches are Asian. You know what I mean?
And why do they all have blue hair? Fuck. Like
Glimmer has pink hair.
Well, okay, not Glimmer, but
I
cut this out of the last episode, but like why does Marinette have blue hair?
Oh, it's Marinette. It's not Mary. Yeah, okay.
What did you say?
I said Marionette.
No, like Willow has blue hair, Marinette has blue hair.
You're so right.
Early in Miraculous, Marinette's mom, who's the Asian one,
Right.
had blue hair, and then they changed it to black, but Marinette's hair stayed blue. I don't know, it's a very common thing in animation for Asians to have blue hair, and it's like, I don't know, I think it's weird.
It's giving characters of color light colored eyes because their designs aren't, quote, interesting enough if they just have brown eyes.
Which I think is like strange, especially for the Owl House, because Luce also has brown hair and brown eyes, and I don't know if they're maybe trying to make people look more interesting from the Boiling Isles, but like Gus looks totally normal. Like, I don't know. Why couldn't Willow just have like a normal Asian person design? I don't get it.
Yeah, why she gotta have green eyes? It's
Are her
like
eyes
plants,
green?
I guess. Yeah, her eyes are green.
Oh, they are green?
I mean, I'm pretty sure. Hold on, let's Google it. So I'm not like being super incorrect.
She definitely has colored eyes.
They've got to be green because like the plant motif, you know.
And you know the only thing that
they're green
that makes her seem Korean to me, like once you told me she was Korean, because I had no idea, but once you told me, I was like, okay, yeah, I kind of see it, and it's because her skin glows. Her skin glows like Koreans in real life, and I was like, okay, yeah.
That's so silly.
Okay, kin, I kind of see it.
Yeah, okay.
Literal kin.
What do you mean?
Like, you know how people say like kin, I kin someone?
Yeah. Oh, I see, because they're sorry, processing slowly. Speaking of She-Ra, I feel like She-Ra fucked up with their characters of color designs. And I'm actually really glad that the Owl House is way more normal about it. As much as we just like shit on them for Willow's design, I feel like Luce, I mean, obviously I'm not Latina, but I heard like good things on the internet about Luce's like characterization, in the sense that like obviously she's a well-rounded like great character, but also like she has little like culturally significant moments that clue you in on like who she is as a person beyond like just her character design.
Also that she
name.
like speaks Spanish all the time.
Yeah, that's true. She does do that as well. But like just beyond that as well, like little like cultural things, which I think is really nice that they actually did that, because She-Ra does not do that. Yes, they have characters that have different designs, and like, you know, Mermista, who does actually look Asian, so I guess points in their favor for that one. But Mermista has like, you know, her sari inspired dress at like the princess ball, and like that's really cute. And like there's people of color and like people with different like varied skin tones and stuff. Like I'm not really sure what's the plant girl's name?
Flora? Fauna?
Flora? Is that? It's not Fauna. Fauna is like the animal one. Perfuma.
Oh, Perfume. I was so
That
close.
was so not close to anything we were there.
Perfuma is such a horrible name. I'm so sorry.
Well, there's one girl named Castaspella.
Seriously?
Yeah, so I don't know. The bar's pretty low. It's camp.
That is camp.
Yeah, it's camp.
I actually do like that one, I must admit. But I feel like it's kind of strange in fantasy type worlds. I mean, if you're already going to go as far as to like have the different fantasy cultures represent real cultures, you may as well go all the way with the language. I think what the Owl House did was really funny when they all start learning Spanish and they're like, we're studying human languages, totally ignoring the fact that they all speak English miraculously. They all speak the same language already. And they just never address that. And
That's really funny.
I think that's fine, and that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. Yeah, because I feel like my issue with She-Ra is that they just have character designs that are, like, diverse, but then there's no, like, cultural specificity, so it feels like a bunch of, like, white people with wearing, like, people of color, like, costumes.
Right.
Which sounds really intense and, like, bad, but... And I love She-Ra, like that's a good show besides the caveat.
Yeah.
But like once again, that's my main problem with the show. Like from my observation, is the like kind of flattening out of like cultural specificity. So it's like you try to get diversity points without actually adding in diversity and doing the work of like understanding like different people.
Speaking of fantasy racism, do you have something to say about that?
I think we're too cloudy right now.
I'm gonna keep that in there.
My weird little slurping. Well, that's my one take. Okay, so there's like a couple camps you can fall into with like fantasy and race commentary. You can be like Tolkien, you know, the father of modern fantasy. Racist, right? You can have mostly white people, and then like you have some brown people or whatever, and then you're just like really racist towards them and portray them in a super stereotypical, like, caricature type way. That's just racism. You're just racist. You didn't try to make commentary. You just decided to be racist.
What did Tolkien do? Just all white people? Oh, that
he had white people.
You're saying what
and
Tolkien
then
did.
It's briefly mentioned in when they fight Sauron at, like, the major battles. I'm gonna get flamed for not knowing the names, but
did you even? Oh, you did read them.
I read them. Yeah, I was pretty into Lord of the Rings. Not like seriously, like I never read the Silmarillion or anything.
Yeah.
But basically, like it's briefly mentioned that some of the human races help Sauron, but everyone who helps Sauron is described as like having brown skin and like kind of like Middle Eastern features. Whereas like, you know, everyone we focus on is white. So it's just like he just did racism. So that's one camp.
Wow.
And then there's like
racism.
She-Ra, which is giving... Anyways. Then there's like the She-Ra camp, which is just like, you just decided to do colorblind casting, essentially. Like, it's basically white people, like, you tried to have a little diversity, but like, you're not really trying to comment on race.
Do you think that it's possible to have like different races in your fantasy world without doing racial commentary?
Ooh, that's a good question. What do you think?
Well, I think it would be hard to do without being accused of, like, as you said, colorblind casting, which is not a bad thing in general. I'm not saying, like, we hate colorblind casting, but it is definitely... People have different takes on it. I personally don't think that it's always bad. I think it's not always the most conscientious thing to do, but I think in certain cases it's very appropriate, such as school plays.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. On smaller scale productions, I feel like it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. People
just like
coming
for
like high school productions, I'm like, y'all.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that was a thing.
Well, like at my school.
Oh,
like,
really?
Within the school community is like, they're like, why don't you join the theater club then? There's like 12 kids in there. Like,
yeah, like who did you want to take the role?
I know.
It was like you had person A, person B.
I know.
So do you think it's possible, like, to have different races, fantasy races, and not do racial commentary?
I mean, okay, we could even say, like, is it possible to have a show with a diverse cast and not do racial commentary?
Like diverse in the sense of like ethnicity.
Sure, yeah.
Because like obviously there's like you could have a all white cast and then have like gay people.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Focusing on that specifically. And I mean, I think yes.
I think you could. I guess that's kind of like the She-Ra camp, right? Like they had a diverse cast and didn't try to do racial commentary. But they kind of did, I guess. Because there's still history. Like, if you give your races different history and they interact with each other in, like, the sense of, like, any type of war or conquest, which is, I think, kind of what happens in She-Ra, because, like, the older races, like, you know, she's a warrior and stuff, so I think, like...
She-Ra is?
She-Ra is a warrior who gets her powers from that other race. I don't remember the lore well enough, actually. But it's like there's interactions of like someone was here first, someone was here afterwards, and then there's like fighting.
But then, okay, now this adds an even deeper question. What counts as racial commentary? Because if you have like two people of different races, just like having a conversation and there are dynamics there that are natural and you reflect that in a TV show, is that racial commentary? Or is it just like real life?
I mean, that is still racial commentary because you're saying something about race and it's media, and art always is saying something whether you like it or not. The absence of saying something is still saying something.
So from that, I would say no, it's not possible to have a show with different races, with characters of different races that all interact and not do social commentary. I don't think that that's possible, actually, based on what we've just concluded.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that assessment.
Because if you're not going to just like have your characters just be white people, then there's going to be dynamics there if you're being...
And you're saying that realistic. Applies broadly as well to like fantasy races as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that
fantasy
assessment.
Races that are going to reflect real life races, which they are always going to do, because no matter what you try to do, like we're humans and we live in this world and we're going to watch it that way.
Yeah, because like anytime you have different cultures with like different stories and backgrounds, and they're gonna have tensions because like difference causes tension, and that's not always a bad thing. Something that can be really good to work through, and you can like learn and grow from that experience. But most of the times it's like, oh, the dwarves and elves have a history of like fighting each other for like territory, and it's like, okay, you may not be trying to make social commentary on our world, but what we're kind of concluding is that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. I guess should I expand on my Dungeon Meshi takes?
Yeah. Okay, so back to the third option.
There's like the camp of you try to do a commentary about racism with fantasy races. So it's like the elves are oppressed by the humans, and sometimes it can go really wrong and sometimes it can go really well. And I feel like that's the thing that is the most interesting to talk about how that like manifests itself. Because I mentioned last episode that I think Dragon Age Absolution, that's the name by the way, I couldn't remember during the previous podcast, but that's a good example because you have characters of color like with other axes of oppression like queerness, and then they are oppressed in world for being a fantasy race, but it's like visually and like in their background they also have like other aspects of their identity that would be oppressed in our world, so it doesn't feel really tonally like inconsistent. Like it's not like, oh, this elves are oppressed in this world and now this white elf is getting oppressed by this like, I don't know, Asian human or something. Like that'd be really random if there was like no sense of like how oppression works in our real world. Not to say that it always has to be 1-to-1.
Can you say it again?
I don't think it's just like 3 options. I would just say like there's just being flat out racist, like in a very straight up way where it's like you're just depicting your characters of color in a racist way. And then there's like trying to be colorblind casting, and then kind of flopping because when you don't consider dynamics of race, you're still probably going to play into your own biases and like depict things in a negative manner, like in a unintentionally racist manner. And then there's like Dragon Age Absolution, which actually takes into account like both our world's experiences and their world's experiences in a way that makes at least me feel like, oh, you understand like how race dynamics work in our world, and then you are also thinking about that when you create oppression and like systems of injustice in your world. And I think Dungeon Meshi mostly falls into the third category. What was really interesting to me is that it is a Japanese piece of media, but it kind of addresses the experiences of being like Asian diaspora, because there's multiple Asian characters in the show and like the manga itself who come from different backgrounds. Like there's one girl who's like explicitly like a refugee from Asia, and it's not said like why she left Asia, but it's kind of implied she left because of like war in Asia. And then it's not called Asia, but I'm just using what I believe the real life analogs to be. And then she moves to like what is fantasy Europe, and then she like migrates to a different place in fantasy Europe, and she experiences like microaggressions from the white people in her party. And like they ask her like, oh, don't you know this other Asian guy, like he's Asian, right? Like, don't you know him? Or they're like, he's from the Eastern Archipelago, which isn't like he's Asian, but like it's basically like he's Asian.
Yeah.
And then she's like, he doesn't even have the same kind of name as people from my island do. Like, we don't all know each other, which was crazy to read in like a fantasy setting.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and there's like dwarves and elves and shit, and then she's like experiencing microaggressions.
Wait, are you sure it was actually written by like mainland Japanese people? Okay,
I may be pronouncing her name wrong, but Roiku Koi is a Japanese woman, like from Japan. And like maybe she's, been to the West or something, or she's just experiencing like weird racism from like white people in Japan. Very possible. Or she just observed it in her life. But then her other character, so that character is like grew up in the West, and it's really interesting because in the official like character handbook that Roiku Koi wrote, she talks about this character Rin Sha. She is the one who experiences the microaggression. It says that she feels no connection to the East and doesn't really like resonate with it, which was like so crazy to me. Like, oh, you gave your little character like some internalized racism. Like she has some like cultural identity issues.
Wow.
Which is like cool to see in a fantasy setting. Yeah. And that's contrasted with other types of Asian characters, other like Asian characters in the storyline, because there's another guy, Toshiro. Yeah.
Shiro.
Yeah, Shiro. Exactly. And he also experiences microaggressions from the protagonist, Leos, who's a white man, like you just implied.
No, I think that's so interesting, and I know this because I've been reading your fan fiction, but I've never seen the show. But I thought that was really interesting that they kept in the microaggressions from the hero and main character of the show. because I've only been reading your fan fiction and like things that you tell me about Leos, and I'm like, he sounds like a dick. I don't like this guy.
He's not a dick though.
But he's the main hero, and everybody likes him. Even the people in his party who are experiencing the microaggressions. And I think that's really
debatable.
Oh, it's debatable. I thought Toshiro still liked him.
Yeah, they're like friends still, but they do have like a fight essentially.
Oh.
They have like a big blowout like fist fight.
No, but that's so real. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, fist fight.
Yeah, you know, it's like a verbal and a fist fight.
Wow.
It's like really interesting. That's another thing that like Dungeon Meshi like sort of handles. A lot of people read Leos as autistic or like some sort of neurodivergent because he doesn't pick up on social cues like pretty much at all. And so their fight is essentially like, I guess minor spoilers for Dungeon Meshi for anyone listening.
Yeah.
But Toshiro, like, he gets really upset with Leos and he's like, what are you doing? Like, you're using like dark magic and like all this stuff. And then Leos is like, gets really upset with him back. And essentially Toshiro's like, actually, I've hated you all along.
Oh.
And you're super annoying and you didn't pick up on any of like my social cues. Like, why can't you just read the room, essentially? And then he's like, it's just like in the past, like there's like flashbacks of Leos like trying to always interrupt Toshiro when he's trying to like basically like riz up, like Toshiro's trying to riz up Leos' sister. And Leos is just like not really perceiving that, and he's just like, can I hang out with you guys too? And then also Leos would constantly like grill him about questions about the East, like when bro's like clearly tired and stuff.
Right.
And so then Leos is like, why didn't you just tell me then if you felt that way? Like, why would you let me believe that you're like my only friend? And then
so
they start like fist fighting.
So true, actually.
Yeah, and
wow.
so like it was pretty crazy because there's like a really huge split in the fandom between like, there's some people who are like, Leos is autistic and that was super ableist of like Toshiro to like tell him to read the room and like he should have just communicated. And then there's like another camp that's like, Leos is literally like basically his racist like coworker because like there's lots of background of like Leos saying things like, oh, Toshiro, isn't your favorite food rice? He didn't say that to him, but like basically because he's Asian and like he got his name wrong and has just been mispronouncing his name, which Toshiro didn't correct him, but like he's been mispronouncing his name for like the last year. And first thing he said to him was, you look weird, where are you from?
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of thing. And so it's like, oh, obviously if like a white person who you work with is constantly microaggressing you, you're not really going to address like your issues with them. You're just gonna like kind of politely try to like pull back and stuff. And so people are like, Leos is in the wrong. And there's some people who are like, guys, that's just like characters having conflict and they both have flaws and like be normal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I see both sides.
Yeah.
Like, I see what you mean by like Leos is not the evil. Just not that anyone was saying he's evil. I guess never mind.
Well, I mean, it's people are messy in fandom, as you know, but
yeah,
I feel like that's another interesting like aspect. Like you said, it's the protagonist being racist towards like other characters, so it is like an interesting take because it's like pretty unambiguously like racist microaggressions, but he's still like the protagonist you're rooting for.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's cool, honestly, because it's like, oh, like Leos is generally like a pretty likable guy, I would say. Like he's pretty like nice, understanding, I guess, of his like party members, and like obviously he has flaws, which clearly the racism. But it's, I don't know, it's like interesting to see like how people growing up in this world gives them like biases, and like other characters as well, like even the character who's quote like the most socially conscious, like probably like Kabru, because his motivations are most rooted in like actual societal issues of trying to like level out the differences in power between like the short-lived races like humans and stuff, or tall men, I guess as they're called in the thing. And between like elves and dwarves, who are like the longer lived races. He's racist against demi-humans, so like furries essentially.
Oh, Kabru?
Yeah, which is interesting. Because yeah, so it's like everyone has like their own biases, and some of them are rooted in, you know, obviously like the fantasy world's like dynamics. Like anthropomorphized animals don't exist in our world. Right. Even obviously some people are furries and stuff, and that's chill. But like we don't generally have anthropomorphized animals.
Right.
But that's still like a commentary that's being made. And like oftentimes the like kobolds and like the other like anthropomorphized animal characters in this are in lower like societal positions. They can't get as good jobs. Some of them are like enslaved and stuff. So it's like pretty interesting to see that layered with like actual just like white people microaggressions against Asian people. Or like, you know, a neurodivergent person like struggling in a friendship because someone didn't communicate with them.
So would you say that Dungeon Meshi is fantasy diversity done right?
I would say for the most part, yes. It is a cool step in the right direction, I would say.
Yeah, the anthropomorphized animals made me think of Wicked.
Ooh, okay, we should talk about Wicked.
Sorry, are you done with Dungeon Meshi?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
And also, I was watching the trailer before this because I knew you wanted to talk about it.
Trailer number 2.
I guess I just didn't process that Elphaba is cast as a black woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't actually think we've talked about this before.
No, we haven't.
But this is a very, very exciting thing because there have not been that many women of color to play Elphaba in the U.S.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy because
she's so person of color coded.
She is literally a person of color.
When she's green.
The whole thing is meant to be an allegory for being different, aka like being a different race. You know, obviously there have been women of color, actors of color to play Elphaba in like other tours and like international tours and stuff like that. But I can't think of that many on Broadway and on like US tours. Wow. So this is really exciting, and I'm really, really glad they cast Cynthia Erivo. She is fantastic, and I was so excited about the second trailer because the first trailer was I was pretty disappointed. It was following the common trend of blockbuster movies these days where they just like tell you the entire plot in the whole trailer. This one was a little bit more ambiguous where like if you're familiar with the plot of the musical, you kind of know what's going on, but it doesn't hand feed it all to you. And I love Cynthia Erivo's version of Defying Gravity.
It sounded really good in the trailer.
So good. And I was about to sing it, but I can't do it right now.
Not today.
And I'm so excited, but I have some things before I get into this to apologize for last week's episode.
Yeah, Sammy's been sending me like posts on Tumblr and stuff amending her previous statement, so that's pretty funny.
Guilty community, I'm so sorry. I really was like, oh yeah, wow, I should ship Glinda and Elphaba, and I was like, wow, I'm the first one to ever think of this. I am not.
Yeah, crazy.
There is quite a robust fandom from both the book and the musical, and I think we said last time that the musical was gayer. I think that was the decision we came to.
Yeah, because you said the book wasn't that gay.
We were false. I'm very far from being done with the book. And I also said that Glinda was not that big of a character in the book. That's also false. She comes back at the end, and I still haven't finished it, but I read like 10 seconds of the fan wiki, and now I know that Glinda is so gay for Elphaba. Glinda is...
As it should be.
And the author, Gregory Maguire, is like, Gelfie is real. And
Slay.
Quoted Virginia Woolf about how he likes
That's
to keep things...
Gay.
Ambiguous. Yeah. And so like, you know, that's his decision to keep it ambiguous in the book. I think that's fine. You know, that's his choice. They took it, I think, textually as I said before, dumbed down the script for the musical. They added in the love triangle and kind of took out a lot of that like sapphic subtext, but they kept it in things like loathing, what is this feeling? And for good, and there's a lot of like renditions on Broadway and like beyond where the actresses who play Elphaba and Glinda will just be like really homoerotic on stage.
Slay.
And that is a slay. And so I think technically the order does go like book is gayest and then the musical is a little bit less gay. But there are rumors that the movie is going to be more gay.
That's gonna be so slay. If they actually go gay with it, like I will eat that up.
I mean, they can never like actually be together.
Mm-hmm.
It can really only be there in strongly suggested subtext. Strongly suggestible subtext, is that correct?
But don't they kiss in the book?
They kiss in the book, but there's not really... I guess there is a time for it. It'd have to be like literally in the middle of Defying Gravity.
That would be fire though. Can you imagine?
Okay, but you know what? I still believe that... I was thinking more about that kiss. And how last time I said that it was just like a normal, like, European greeting type
And then
of
I was
kiss.
like, that sounds super gay.
No, I think you agreed with me that it was, like, normal.
No, I said that it sounded really fruity.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. What I've decided about it is that, like, it was a normal, like, socially conventional kind of kiss, but Elphaba just made it really gay because of what she said when she did it.
Kind of iconic.
Like, I think
Yeah, the dialogue was crazy.
I think it's normal to kiss your friends to say, like, goodbye, but then she's like, hold on, my sweet, or something like that.
Yeah, that was so
like,
gay.
That's the gay part. And so now I do think that kiss was gay.
Slay.
So I amend that as well. But I don't know if I trust John M. Chu. The movie looks really great.
Is that the director?
This is the director of the movie. I really like, surprisingly, all the CGI. I think it really works for this movie.
It looked pretty good, yeah.
Like, the
it
big
didn't look
block,
that cheap or anything.
it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
But even the really beautiful, like, CGI, the big blockbuster CGI, I'm just like, it looks like it's too shiny. But in this case, I actually think it really, really works for this movie. I also heard they did a lot of practical stuff, and that's honestly probably why it looks so good. Like, they planted all those flowers. Apparently, they also planted a field of flowers in, like, the lesbian flag colors.
Whoa.
But I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that, like, the author said that in the books they're both bisexual. I don't know about that. I don't think that, maybe that was just a rumor. But
in my heart, it's true.
In my heart, it's true. Honestly, Glinda, like, gives lesbian to me.
That's kind of facts, because she's so high femme. Like,
she's like such a lesbian. I do headcanon that Elphaba is bisexual, though.
Slay.
Yeah, especially
I didn't know it was Jonathan Bailey.
Jonathan Bailey? Yeah.
He was looking pretty fine in the trailer, not gonna lie.
He's a hottie in everything.
Yeah.
Have you seen his clip of he's gonna be in Heartstopper?
Yeah, I have seen that.
He
That's
looks good there too.
Yeah, no, oh my god, in the trailer when Elphaba, like, wipes his, like, cheek with her thumb, I was like, oh.
Oh my
slay.
god. Okay, another gay thing about the musical is, so Glinda bullies Elphaba and, like, gives her this, like, ugly hat, like the witch's hat, to wear to this dance.
Oh.
And then when she shows up, everyone's, like, making fun of her. But she wears the hat proudly, and she goes to dance by herself in the dance floor to no music. And that is the moment in my headcanon when Glinda falls in love with her, and she actually, she's, like, popular, right? And so she goes up to Elphaba, and she dances with her to get all the other sycophants of hers to accept Elphaba.
Wait, that happens?
That happens in the musical. And, like, that's pretty gay. They're dancing together.
Wait, but she's the one who gave her the hat?
Yeah.
Also?
So she bullies her, and then she realizes
that
how strong she realizes it was fucked up, and also realizes, like, how strong, like, Elphaba is, and, like, how she takes that in stride. And I think the line is, like, she's at the dance with Fiyero, and they're both watching Elphaba dance, and Fiero's like, wow, like, she doesn't give a fuck, or something like that. And Glinda's like, of course she does. She's just pretending that she doesn't. And then she goes up and, like, dances with her and gets everyone to, like, stop bullying Elphaba. And it's just,
that's
like,
kind of crazy psychological mind games.
Beautiful moment. Beautiful moment.
That is pretty good.
What is that from?
I don't know.
Anyway, fantasy racism. The reason that it's so great that Elphaba is being played by a black woman in this movie is because that's kind of like the allegory. I remember noticing a lot when we were younger, that when people were trying to do allegories about race in fantasy, they would do just, like, two white characters essentially, and then like you said before, like, one of them is an elf, or one of them is a mermaid, or some sort of magical creature that is supposed to signify that they're quote-unquote other. And I think that was to, in their mind, show their audiences that, look, oh, these people are the same, because you're subconsciously like, oh, they're both white people, like, why is this white person mistreating this other white person, and, like, that's not right. And that's what you're supposed to think in your head, but that's, like, fucked up, because that's directly aimed at white people as the audience only, and then also just, like, crazy, because people of color, queer people, neurodivergent people, any, like, minority group, are not just white people with elf ears.
Some queer white people of color think like that, though. Or neurodivergent white people.
Say that louder into the mic.
No, I don't want to get canceled.
Say it louder into the mic.
Okay. I was gonna say some queer white people and some neurodivergent white people act like that, though.
They're like, it needs to be consistent. You need to show it clearly. Is that what you mean? What do you mean? Or that they act like people of color are just white people with elf ears?
Yeah, they act like it's all interchangeable. Like every axis of oppression is like the same and we can all like understand each other without effort, which is not true. Obviously, with effort, we can understand each other, but the experience is not the same. And I feel like that's perhaps the issue maybe with a lot of fantasy racism allegories. Like you're saying, like this slapping on the elf ears thing might work if it's like an analogy for queerness, because queerness just functions in a different way because it's so fluid, you know. People can move in and out of queerness, people can like come into the culture of queerness, and that's normal. But
for
you
some
can't,
people, yeah,
right, but like you can't become Korean,
right,
as much as that Ollie
as much as people like
desires to be. You know, because
transracial people, we're coming for you.
Yeah, we're coming for your asses. And it's like, yeah, obviously, like race and gender and sexuality are all social constructs, but it's like they still have real life impacts and implications. And yeah, maybe that's the issue with like fantasy racism, because it acts like obviously being an elf generally isn't something that's like changeable. But I don't know, this is just kind of reminding me of like some commentary I've seen about like science fiction and fantasy often taking like the experiences of people of color and then placing them onto, like, essentially you said, like fantasy characters that are white. But I think like if I were to see, if when I read and watch science fiction and fantasy, I don't necessarily want to see like Asian people, like say Korean people experiencing like Japanese colonization in my science fiction and fantasy in a way that's like essentially just like reiterating the trauma, because it's like
a reminder.
Exactly, because like science fiction and fantasy is essentially like, obviously it can be a vehicle for social commentary, but a large chunk of it is like escapism, and that's fine. And you know, media exists for all different types of reasons. I think this is why I have problems with the Poppy War.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about that, because that at least was like, that's very relevant to what we're talking about. Yeah, so the Poppy War, I know Sammie recently got it from her friend, so she hasn't read it yet.
I haven't read it yet, yeah.
But I read it like a couple years ago, so obviously, you know, I could get some details wrong. But essentially, like, the Poppy War is a historical, like, fantasy. It's a retelling of the
Sino-Japanese,
yeah. It's a retelling of the Sino-Japanese wars, and especially, like, you know, conflicts surrounding opium. But the issue with that book, in my opinion, well, of the many issues I take with that book, one of the many issues that I take with the Poppy War is that it has an essentially, like, unaltered retelling of the rape of Nanjing towards the end of the book. And I think there's a place to explore like historical retellings of very traumatic historical events, but tonally speaking, it felt extremely off, because the main character starts in this Harry Potter-esque like magic school, and then they're thrown into war, which some people have argued is an analogy for how, like, you know, children get thrown into war and they're like still naive, and then it's like a complete tonal shift, which okay, like maybe, but I just feel like it was really using like that historical like event, which is very real, very traumatic, for like to move along the plot, and it didn't have the like racial commentary to back it up, because the main character, basically they're coded as like a people group that was colonized and experienced oppression at the hands of East Asian countries. But they're both brown, and these characters are both like portrayed in a way where it's like they're very violent. They're both like two of the main like focused on characters that have magic, like other characters that I believe have magic, but they're both very like violent, and like the guy in particular is very aggressive, and he's kind of like the revolutionary. And it really felt like, because of things that happen to him and things that happen to her and her choices later on in the book, it doesn't seem like it was trying to critique the portrayal of like brown Asians in comparative to maybe like lighter skinned Asians as like kind of like quote magical like savages. It was just kind of like reinforcing it. So to have the rape of Nanjing in a book that does like essentially racist racial commentary, it really felt very disrespectful and just like concerning and not a good handling of that kind of thing, where it's like you take a real historical event and you shove it into your fantasy thing. And even if you try to have like, you know, actual like coded characters that were coded as like Chinese, Japanese, like Taiwanese involved, it still like flopped terribly because you didn't consider like the impact of like, am I depicting these people in a way that's like how is this going to affect the real people I'm trying to depict? Like, that clearly was not thought about.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of fantasy authors and creators feel like they have that excuse where they're like, oh, it's fantasy. I mean, it's clearly like, it's like on one hand they want to reflect life and make impactful statements like that, but on the other hand they kind of like use that out.
Yeah.
At the same time. And it's like you can't have both. Because the whole point of fantasy is not... I mean, people use fantasy as escapism, but that's the thing about escapism. It's like you can't ever really escape. Did you say that? I think you said that on another episode.
I think I might have, but we might have cut that because I don't remember.
Whatever. Now I've just exposed if we cut it, I've just exposed myself for quoting you. It's fine. I don't mind. It's no excuse though. Don't be racist.
Yeah, that's facts. You really can't use an excuse. Like, even if you're writing fantasy, once you start creating art, you have to think about the implications of what you're creating and how that's going to affect real life people. Like, at that point, well, one, either do your research, put in the work, make sure you're depicting people in, like, a way that's complex and multifaceted.
Yeah.
And that you're not playing into, like, harmful stereotypes and recognize your own biases. And honestly, you need to do that with essentially any piece of art you create. But, like, if you're not going to put in that work, don't try to write, like, a huge, like, fantasy epic and then fuck it up. Because I feel like that's what's happening with a lot of Asian American literature, especially in the YA field these days. Like, the Poppy War is not YA, but within, like, the YA realm, it's happening a lot these days. And it's just, like... Okay, maybe you should cut this out. But I almost... wish we would go back to not having Asian American rep in those books if it's gonna be like that.
You'd rather have no Asian American rep than like racism.
Yeah, than like racism and like classism. Because I was telling you,
not having them also kind of racism. Like if you look at the
trend. It definitely is. But I'm like thinking in my mind, what's more harmful is like having these books that like put forward these like racist, like pro-colonial, like capitalistic, like these like basically like reinforcing these systems, but it's like using the voices of people of color. Because I'm sure, like, I know for a fact there's Asian American authors that are putting out amazing work right now. It's just like I haven't seen as much of it in the YA field, which is very unfortunate because I feel like that's really formative for a lot of people. Yeah, like that was really formative for me, like reading YA growing up. Yeah, so I'm like, that's
true. Like reading that kind of stuff as a kid like fucks you up.
Exactly.
And then you're gonna grow up and write more of it.
Yeah, if that's your like dream or whatever. Yeah. But there are good Asian American books.
Can you give us some? Can you drop some recs?
I mostly have been reading contemporary Asian American fiction, but I guess one that's more sci-fi fantasy coded is Severance by Ling Ma. It's about a Chinese American like office worker. Essentially, she works in like Bible printing, like production. And damn. yeah. And she is so ingrained in like the like capitalist grind set that when the zombie apocalypse hits, she's still going to work every day until she's the last person at her job. And it's like
to print the Bibles?
Yeah, to print the Bibles and just like do it, I don't know, like spreadsheets and shit.
Damn.
And it's like the world is literally ending around her, but she can't stop working. And it's so like I've never read a book besides I remember really liking Alice Oseman's like radio silence depiction of like how mental illness like feels and how being like a depressed teenager feels. But besides that, like Severance by Ling Ma is like the book that I would say has the most like accurate depiction of depression I've ever read in my life. Like, it feels so empty. But
Wow.
it's, like, so cathartic at the same time.
Yeah.
But it will fuck you up, so, you know, be in a good mental space
I mean,
when
that
you read
actually
it.
sounds great. I do want to read
Yeah,
that.
you should read it. So there is, obviously, of course, there is amazing Asian American, like, literature out there. It's just that YA these days is seeming to feed into, like, supporting, like, the current systems of power. And I guess that's just what the
Yeah.
publishing industry is deciding to uphold.
Well, because YA is one of the most, like, capitalistic, turning
True,
out, like,
marketable.
shit right now. And it makes sense that the big publishers would want to promote that sort of capitalist, like, colonial propaganda.
That's true. I'm sure there's good stuff also. I just haven't read a lot of YA recently, so I'm sure there is some good stuff coming out. It's just like the really mainstream stuff on, like, you know, quote, book talk and like that kind of thing seem like they aren't giving.
I mean, I don't really know if that's if like good commentary is what I expect from my YA.
But the thing is, it can and should be, because just look at, like, the Hunger Games.
That's true.
Like, that is the genre where we should be having the most refined, like, straightforward, easy to understand social commentary. I also would recommend, this is not an Asian American book, but a YA, like, SFF-esque, like, adjacent book, science fiction fantasy for those of you who don't know the abbreviation, is The Marrow Thieves by Dimolina is the last name. I do not remember the person's first name. Anyway,
Okay.
The Marrow Thieves is a book about an indigenous teenager in Canada, I believe, and the residential schools have been reopened and revamped a little ahead in the future. So it's essentially a world where indigenous people, well, I guess I need to back up. So basically people have stopped dreaming. It's like a worldwide sickness, and the only people who still have dreams are indigenous people. And so indigenous people's bone marrow is being harvested by, like, the government, essentially. And so it's kind of like a recalling back to, like, earlier colonial periods where children and, like, people are being stolen from, like, their homes and then being, like, taken to these, like, extractive, like, institutions. And it's about this, like, group of, like, indigenous people who are, like, on the run from the government. And it's, like, a really, really, like, poignant, like, obviously it's very, like, sad and stuff, but it's also, like, hopeful and kind of, like, about reconnecting with your culture when it's, like, been stripped from you, and how you find family, like, when these, like, systems are, like, upon you, like, of colonization and, like, that kind of thing. And, like, that's YA. And obviously that book has issues with it. Like, I would say it has, like, I think it had some issues with, like, sexism, if I remember correctly. Like, the depiction of women was, like, a little interesting at times. But, you know, obviously despite its issues, it's, like, the heart of the message was, it was trying to teach something to, like, kids. And, like, I think, like, that's not a bad thing in YA. Like, obviously, like, most adults don't want to read, like, super preachy stuff. But, like, I don't think that's a bad thing to, like, lay it out for kids.
Yeah. And also, nothing is ever really gonna be perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if we learn anything from Dungeon Meshi and Leos, our protagonist, is that, like, things can be good with being a little bit bad, too.
Yeah, so true.
Because that's how people are, too.
Yeah, that's how people
like,
are, too.
everybody's a little bit bad.
And people are the ones making art.
Exactly. So, we have to try our best. But in general, we also need to do better.
Yeah, no, we do need to do better. Like, can we bring back, like, good fantasy?
When was it ever here?
I mean...
Let's be for real. Not in Tolkien's time. Not with Tolkien, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think right
who
now.
else wrote around Tolkien's time.
I feel like most of the good stuff I'm thinking of is, like...
C.S. Lewis?
Science fiction. No, there's gotta be.
Was C.S. Lewis around the same time as Tolkien, or was
Yeah,
he
they were
after?
friends.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were both, like, World War One-ish era, I suppose. Because that's the war they both fought in, I believe. Yeah, that's actually how Lord of the Rings came about. It was a commentary on, like, war. And, like, the trauma of war and stuff. And that's, like... I feel like that's what the ring is sort of an analogy for. Like, it changes you forever, like, once you hold it. And, like, no one else can, like, really... Yeah, and, like, also just, like, the trauma of, like, the ring. It's, like, no one else, unless they've also held the ring, can really, like, understand you, and it stays with you throughout the rest of your life. Because that's what happens to, like, Frodo.
Sam.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has good themes and, like, messages. I mean, obviously he shouldn't be racist, but, like, the heart of why Lord of the Rings was so impactful as, like, a book and created essentially, like, a new genre is because it had, like, a real life message it was trying to convey to its audience. And that's also the same with the Hunger Games. And that's why, like, you see, like, these people who are trying to, like, write after them, a lot of times they're just taking the aesthetics or like the world building elements of these stories without the social commentary, and that's why they fall flat.
Without that kind of substance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people who are like, I mean, I think that totally makes sense to want like escapism in your escapism, but like the good shit has always been substantial.
Yeah.
Substantive.
Yeah, substantive. Yeah.
To quote the musical that beat out Wicked for
Avenue
the
Q.
2003 Tony Award for Best Musical, everyone's a little bit racist.
Oh, is that the musical that has that line? Wait, that's so funny.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. And I will see you next week, Tae.
And I will hear you next week, Sammie.
Bye.
Bye.